We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Monday. We're starting out another week. This past weekend, a little crazy, and we'll be talking some about that. But I've got some help today. Get a lot more guests on the show, and that's always a good thing. I like to get other folks' perspective on things. And who we have today is Eric from Iowa. We haven't heard from him in a while, so it's good to have you back, Eric.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be on the show. Our schedules just haven't lined up lately.
Well, I'm here every day, so we'll get to it at one point or another. So I was sure of that. So not much to talk about, not much going on.
Oh yeah, nothing at all.
Um, Obviously, yesterday with this, it turns out it's an assassination attempt, but based on what it was a mass shooting too, because there were like three people that were hit with these bullets. So it could be classified as a mass shooting. But this assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, what was your first reaction to that?
Well, when the headline first came across, it said three loud pops sounded like fireworks at the Trump rally. I'm like, okay, whatever, not a big deal. I didn't think too much of it. And then more headlines popped up, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is something.
Yeah.
So then I started looking into it. And then, in thanks to what I've noticed from doing TikToks, I found for me, I don't know if it's just me, but if I release too many videos too close together, they bury them. So I try to wait at least an hour. So I had just posted one. So I gave it about an hour before I did anything. So I had time to actually process what was a little bit more of the information, what was going on, everything had been done. And I had time to think about it a little bit. But initially, I thought it was going to be nothing.
Yeah, I did too. To be perfectly honest with you, we were texting. My whole family has a text that we text together. My brother's kind of in line mentally with me, and so are my nephews and other people on this thing. So I was going to say I'm ashamed to say, but I'm not ashamed to say there were a lot of jokes in that text messages after the shooting. It seems unsympathetic, and as I said on a TikTok today, um, I'm not sympathetic to Donald Trump or the Republicans at all. I'm a little sympathetic to the country and how it's affected the country, but these motherfuckers want us to be sympathetic when Paul Pelosi gets hammered with a hammer by a Trumplafuck. They laughed. When George Floyd was killed, murdered in the streets of Minneapolis, they laughed. When the Trumplafucks charged the Capitol building and killed police officers and such, they said it was a peaceful protest. So I don't feel too sorry for them. And then they, of course, said, this is a Democrat. This is what the Democrats do. This is what they always do. And then we find out it's a white, straight kid from Pennsylvania who's also a registered Republican. So, and that's how I knew it was a Republican, because he missed. They always fuck things up. Anyway, see, I wouldn't do that on TikTok, but I'll do it here.
Oh, that was good.
We had other jokes too, like I hope Jodie Foster's impressed. That takes you back a ways to
that
John
does.
Hinckley.
That does. But the thing, there's a lot of weird with this. The more you look at it and the more you see the clips, there is so many things that are just glaringly weird.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it's staged, because they haven't proven that yet. But a lot of it looks odd. And I don't know if it was just secret, like a major Secret Service lapse, if he's gotten too buddy with these agents and they're just listening to his lead because that's the type of people he wants,
Right.
or what's going on. But it looks weird.
When I first saw the video, I didn't hear any sound. I just saw the video on my phone because somebody texted me. And they picked him up and he did his thing with his hand and thing like that. I said, this seems staged. That's the first thing that came to my mind. And then when I heard that a couple of people died, or at least two people died, including the shooter, I thought, that's kind of a stretch to say that staged. That's quite a ways to go to stage a charade. So I doubted at that point that it was a charade. And then we found out that Donald Trump got hit. Um, and then, of course, everybody's saying, well, he just hit a blood capsule and it bled, or he got hit with a shard of glass and not a bullet. And I go, there was a guy shooting at the president. People died. I don't know how that is staged. But the problem is that Donald Trump, if anybody's going to stage something like that, it wouldn't be that surprising if Donald Trump did. I don't want to go out on TikTok and say this is staged and then look stupid in the end. Everything I see says it's not staged, but you're right. It looks fishy.
Like I don't want to say it's staged either. There's just things that are weird. That's why I went out, I said the same thing. I don't want to say it's staged, but it looks weird. But Joe Biden came out and said he's launching a full independent or he's having a full independent investigation launched into this. And he wants to see why there was so many Secret Service lapses in this whole thing. And I said, I want to see the report. And I want to see what's in their final investigation. And if this does come out that they stage this or something, the people responsible, all of them, for whoever set it up, Trump on down, needs to be charged as an accessory to murder because people lost their lives over this.
I have a better way to prove whether it was staged or not, and we could do it right now. We could do it on True Social. We could do it on Instagram. He touched his ear. He went down on his own accord. He didn't fall down. He comes up and it's bloody and it's bleeding pretty substantially. His claim is that he was nicked by a bullet. Now, this young man was at 130 yards, which is well in range of an AR-15 and what he had. Now, if Donald Trump was shot with an AR-15 and it even nicked his ear, the way you can prove to me that it really happened is show me the ear, show me the wound. Because I got to tell you, if you get even nicked by a bullet from an AR-15, it's going to take a chunk out. You're not going to get a scratch.
The one picture that I saw that looked like you could see his ear, it looked like his ear was intact, basically intact.
I thought so too. It was bloody, but
Yeah.
it was intact. That would be more indicative of what they said with the glass hitting it. Now, I will tell you this, whether he got hit by a bullet or glass, that's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That glass happened because there was an actual bullet that was shot. So it wasn't like he wasn't being shot at. But there are some people say it's faked and all this stuff. And I don't know how that would be. That is a lot of gall if you do that and you sacrifice members of your crowd. If that's the case, that's why it seems unlikely that it's a staged event. But of course, Donald Trump is one of the most despicable human beings in the world and doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself.
Right. But like I said, there's some things that look off. Like when he finally comes back up, the Secret Service are supposed to be shielding him, his head and chest, because there's an active shooter going on. After they say the shooter's down, you see the press come over, get in position. How did the press get that close coming up to the president during an active shooter situation? The Secret Service should have been keeping them back or opening fire, assuming threat, because he was just shot at. That doesn't make any sense. The photographers weren't there. They moved into the frame.
Well, that's the interesting thing about this. You watch TikTok now and everybody's an expert. I used to be Secret Service. My cousin's Secret Service. I dated a Secret Service. So I know exactly what they do. But what did seem strange is that he alleged to get shot. He goes down. They go to cover him up. And then within a minute and a half max, he stands up, pokes his head up, and raises his hand. Now, you don't know if there's another shooter. In fact, I've heard some other people say there might have been another shooter. I don't think there was. But the fact of the matter is the Secret Service doesn't do that. They keep you pretty well covered up and they run you off to an armored vehicle as quickly as possible. It took them 2 minutes to get him 50 feet. Right. That seems weird.
And in the time when he stands up and as he's going to do the pose with the fist up, you hear him tell the Secret Service, wait. And then he mouths fight, fight, fight. as he's got his fist in the air. And as he's getting ready to do the fist up, there was a cell phone video from behind, like where you could see the bottom part of the podium. That's when the photographers come in to get the nice shot of him standing there. They weren't standing there prior. None of this makes any sense by normal Secret Service protocol from what I would assume they would do. Now, I'm not a police officer or anything, but common sense says they would keep him down, get him off stage. They wouldn't let him poke his head completely up and be exposed.
Well, and I don't think either you or I are prone to just jump on board any conspiracy theory. And I know a lot of people on TikTok and on the internet will start screaming conspiracy theory, that it was fake, that it was a hoax. That's not what we're saying. I've said officially on TikTok that I don't think it was staged based on what I know. But what I know may change as investigations ensue or we see the ear. I mean, if he shows me a fully intact ear, I'm going to say he wasn't shot. Now, if it's just a cut, then it was glass. Or if there is no damage to the ear, that's a whole different story. But I want to see the wound. And we probably will never see a wound. And Donald Trump will have his hair now over his ears. I guarantee you that's what he'll do. But you know what the best part of this was? And I couldn't help myself as I'm watching this and everybody's looking at the ear and looking at what they're doing. I'm looking at that motherfucker's hair because his hair's kind of spread down, you know, like in the 70s when you parted your hair in the middle, and there's a lot of bare spots up here. And then when you turn to the back, it's a lot of bare spots covered there. Donald Trump is bald as a motherfucker. Present company excluded. But we're not trying to cover it up. I mean, we are what we are. But I was trying to imagine, as narcissistic as he is, was he thinking about his hair? Apparently not.
But he was worried about his shoes.
Now, why do you think that is?
Now, first thought was, it's been reported that he has lifts in his shoes to make him taller. So first thought was he didn't want to be caught without them because that'll make him look short and make him look weaker. And then I'm not prone to conspiracy theories, but I've seen things talking about he was blading himself, that's how he got bloody, that he had a blood packet or whatever, a blood capsule. Maybe he had something hidden in his shoe. That's why his shoes were off. And he wanted to make sure the evidence of that went with him.
Well, that's the question.
I'm not saying he actually did that, but if he was going to do it, like, and then his shoes being off makes sense.
Well, you know, that's the weird thing. I was wondering why his shoes were off, because I know of circumstances when people have been hit by cars, they've literally been lifted out of their shoes, and it's weird that their shoes would be away from the body. But Donald Trump, for a guy who got shot, I've never been shot, thank God, but he's standing there and you can see him wince and grab his ear like he got bit by a horsefly or something. I'm thinking if you get hit by a bullet, that's going to sting like a bitch. And Donald Trump is kind of a bitch. I'm surprised the reaction was so minuscule that he didn't really cry and whine, because he seems like a crier to me.
Yeah, to me too. And the whole, like, he just went, oh, like something happened. And then he gets down. Like they tell him to get down, or he starts to slowly go down. Like, he took his time getting down, and take his time. I mean, like, he didn't drop it. He wasn't drugged down by Secret Service. He got down on his own. Then they swarmed him. You know, it just, the whole thing seems, I don't know why his shoes would have been off. And you wouldn't think he would have took them off if he's standing there talking to him, because he's going to want to appear, even if they didn't have lifts. Shoes automatically give you an inch or two,
right?
You know, in height, just from normal. Right. So why would none of this make sense?
Well, yeah, it's all very weird, and sometimes I think to myself, you know, every time something like this happens, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories. And it's the reason for that is exactly what the Republicans do with everything. They take every little detail, they exploit it, they expand on it, and they come up with scenarios to justify that one particular thing. I mean, there's other things about that video. There's that one guy that they claim is, his name is like Brian Fusco, but they claim it's JFK Jr. in disguise. And then they showed this video of a woman behind him to his right. Well, actually to his left, but from us seeing it to her right, she's just sitting there, perfectly calm, holding up a sign. The shots go, Trump goes down, and she's just sitting there, unaffected by the thing. And then, as he's going down and she's unaffected, she puts down the sign and picks up a video, a phone, and starts videoing it. Like, I mean, a guy just right next to you just got shot, and you're not shaken up by that? That seemed weird.
Yeah, the whole thing, like I said, everything of it seems weird. The crowd behind the shooter was coming from behind them.
Right.
And then the crowd behind him, some of them duck, they do this little number, or they slide off to the side a little bit. None of them really get down in any sort of a protective thing.
No.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. Some of them just sit there, they don't even move.
Right.
And a couple of them, by the time he stands back up, they're up.
You know what, though? I don't know that that's unusual. People are a little oblivious. Some people thought it was firecrackers. Even if they see Donald Trump go down, they they're kind of unaware. They don't know what to do. It's a foreign situation for them. So I'm not as concerned about them not reacting. But you throw all those things in there, you think, maybe it's a conspiracy, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But then you got the reality of life. And down in front of Donald Trump is a man who was covering up his kids to protect him, and he ends up dead. There's two others that are in critical condition because they were shot by real bullets. Now, I have to think, if it was faked, if it was staged, and I'm not saying it is because everything I know tells me it's not, but if it's staged, Donald Trump had to be surprised. There's no way that Donald Trump would expect to get injured in this thing. That was just an extra plus for him if it was staged. You know, what they would do is the shots would be fired, collateral damage, they don't care about it. Donald Trump wouldn't have been hit. He would go down and cover it up, and then he would come up like the triumphant hero. But that wasn't what happened. He got either cut or shot or whatever. But there's the other parts of this too that people keep talking about, and there is no explanation for it. This kid, and he's a kid, 20 years old, somehow got the higher ground, the vantage point over Secret Service, over the police, and apparently there was some military there too. He got up on the top of this building and took a direct line shot at Donald Trump. If he'd been a professional, Donald Trump would have been dead.
Yeah.
Unless
exactly.
they didn't mean to hit him.
Right. Well, and that's the thing when some of the conspiracy theorists on the right are saying, well, Joe Biden ordered that or whatever. If Joe Biden ordered it, he would have had a marksman up there, and that would have been one shot. Donald Trump would have gone down, and it would have been over if he had the high ground. It wouldn't have been what the results we got. Joe Biden wouldn't have botched it if this was staged by somebody on Biden's team.
Well, you know, I brought this up in a TikTok, and it's something we should note. It was predictable for the Republicans to come out and say, Joe Biden ordered this. He did this. We got to investigate. He should be indicted. Joe Biden did this. And I had to remind some Republicans, yeah, that's not going to happen. Because the Republicans, with the help of the Supreme Court, made every official duty of the president, made him immune. And we know it would tie in here because the judge or the justice asked Trump's lawyers. So if a president brought in SEAL Team 6 and killed his political opponent, would that be official act? And Trump's lawyers said, yeah. So if Joe Biden, and he didn't, Joe's not that kind of guy, he doesn't need to do it. But if he did do something to take Trump out of his misery, ain't nothing we can do to him because the Supreme Court said so.
Oh, exactly. He'd have immunity, but like I said, if he was going to do it, it wouldn't be this 20-year-old kid who missed. It'd
No.
be somebody who would have made the shot. But um, now there was one photo I saw going around of two gunmen up on a roof. They're like, see, you can see them clear as day. They're here. They're the ones that took the shot. The two gunmen on a red building with a white roof. Those were police on the building behind the crowd,
Right.
to the right and behind the crowd. They had the line of sight for the building where the gunman who shot Trump, that gunman was at, where the other gunman was. Um, and then there's a water tower in the distance, and I don't know if anybody was on top of that and why they didn't have a sniper up there too. I don't know.
Well, in the audio, you heard like pop, pop, pop. There was a slight pause, and then there was just a barrage of pops. And she know that what that was. The shooter took the shots, and then the snipers, the police, took them out. That was the
Right.
second flurry of them because there was multiple people shooting. Um, it's it's just a very weird situation. That higher ground should have been covered one way or another, either at the base of the building or having somebody on top of the building. This is a question that everybody's asking. And how does the Secret Service make a mistake like this? It makes no sense.
It doesn't. That's why Joe Biden says he wants an independent review of the Secret Service failing at at this event. He wants to have it looked at. He said Donald Trump has already afforded the highest level of security that the Secret Service can give, but he wants them to do whatever they can to increase that as well.
So,
Um,
so will we ever find out, do you think? I mean, they'll say, this is an investigation. We can't tell you. To be a Jeffrey Epstein type of thing. It'll be impossible to get the information.
I am hoping will have the results at some point, especially considering this affects Joe too.
Absolutely.
Because if depending on the results of this, now, like I said earlier, if it comes out that this was somehow finagled by the Trump campaign to make Trump look like some kind of a martyr, um, everybody involved needs charged.
Yeah.
But if it was just a failing of the Secret Service, Joe Biden needs to know. And maybe, I don't know if the public would need to know, but we would kind of know because there will be changes to what the Secret Service does going forward after whatever review is complete, because it's going to affect how they protect Joe Biden too.
Well, in spite of the fact that it's a Republican that did this, and the thing about it is they keep saying he's 20 years old. He's a registered Republican. But prior to him voting as a Republican, he gave $15 to some liberal thing. The fucking kid is 20. He doesn't know what the fuck he is. He's got angst and fear, and he's doing stuff to try to get famous or whatever, to try to make this guy a political person at all. I don't know that you can do that. But we do know he has the ideology of the Republican side because we saw that he wore a sweatshirt or a shirt that basically promotes a gun happy YouTube channel. He was big on guns. It was funny. I heard a story, and I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody talked to one of his high school classmates, and apparently he was in the rifle club in Pennsylvania. I've never had a high school with a rifle club, but apparently they had a rifle club. And I don't even know if this is a true story, but it's interesting. He was in the rifle club, but he got kicked out because his aim was so shitty. He was dangerous to have around.
If that's true, that makes sense. I mean,
Trying to prove himself.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that,
if coming from a rural setting, and if they had a rifle club at their high school and stuff, guessing guns were a big part of his friend group's culture. And if he was such a bad shot, if that story is true, I don't know if that would be enough motive though.
no.
It doesn't add up. But then you had what's his name, who shot Reagan because he thought it would impress Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
So does motive really matter?
Joke's on him. We found out later she's a lesbian. Oh shit, he fucked that up, didn't he? Wow. Uh, John, you could have looked like George Clooney and you wouldn't have pressed uh, Jodie Foster. I love fucking Jodie Foster, one of the greatest actresses of all time. I remember watching her when she was a little kid. We're about the same age. Thought she was cute then. She was just a funny little actress, and then she became this great actress. And that had to be a problem for her when she became part of this inadvertently. But we do need to find out what the motivation is. And the talk we're hearing now is they can't find any motivation for this. They don't. He doesn't really have a huge profile in terms of social the social networks. He doesn't have much there. I don't know. Did you see on TikTok? There was a guy claiming to be him saying, "Oh, you got the wrong guy," and all that stuff. And everybody goes, "He's still alive. What's going on?" And that just perpetuate. This guy was a guy that kind of looked like him, that was trying to get clout. That's all he was doing, but people were buying into it.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that he but actually I didn't see his original post. I saw somebody else stitch his
Right,
post
right.
and call him out for chasing clout. Like, no, this isn't the active shooter. And if you're the type of person to go on TikTok and claim to be the person who shot at a former president just for clout and some level of fame, there's something seriously wrong with you.
Yeah,
And I
you need
tend
a
to
visit.
agree.
You need a visit, and he will probably get a visit for
Um,
obstructing.
speaking of speaking of visits, one of the creators I follow, I don't remember which one. It wasn't one of the bigger ones though. Made a comment about all of the rhetoric going on since then. There's a lot of people on the right saying, "Well, this is the shot heard around the world," and "Oh, the first shot of our civil war," and a whole bunch of comments calling for violence. And he pointed out there's probably going to be a lot of people in the wake of this that are going to make stupid comments like that are going to end up getting visits by people in suits going, "What's going on?"
Well, and that's the thing we have to consider too, over and above what happened to Donald Trump. This seems to be kind of random, some crazy little kid doing this. But with the way Trump fucks react, we have to seriously consider a potential retaliation because Trump fucks are just that dumb to do something like that. I think the protection around Joe Biden is going to be significant. And if one of them tries doing this, you might see some Trump fucks end in their own lives because they aren't smart enough to uh, try to do what they think. I mean, that's the one thing we're watching on TikTok. I'm watching all these people. Oh, you did it now. You did it now. If it would have come a little bit closer, you would have been on your knees begging for mercy because we would have come at you. I just want to remind folks, they told us when you indict them, there's going to be a civil war. Just you wait. So we indict him, nothing happens. If you convict him, we're gonna come out, there's a civil war. He gets convicted, nothing happens. Now you understand, you think what they're saying. They're saying, "Oh, you're lucky. You're lucky you didn't kill Donald Trump. Otherwise, there would have been a civil war." Well, isn't clipping him on the ear and shooting him in a rally enough to get you riled up to do something? They keep pushing back the goalpost. These guys are cowards and pussies, hoping people will buy into their threats.
Well, we've talked about it several times. They tend to believe that if they get their civil war that they're calling about, they're going to be taking on people like you and me,
Yeah,
and they're not going to be taking on us. They're going to be taking on the military.
yeah.
Maybe they're finally getting that, as a lot of their groups are getting visits by the FBI. Some of them have been arrested for being criminals or whatever, but it's a lot of talk by a lot of people, and I'm convinced at least a good chunk of the people posting on like TikTok and other social media, especially accounts that have no profile picture and no posts of any kind, few followers and only following a couple of accounts, the ones that look almost new. I'm convinced a lot of those are from bot farms that are just
Yeah.
out there stirring the shit. But I don't expect much. Maybe a couple lone people, but I don't expect any major violence out of this.
No, 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 that's absolutely true. The other thing that we keep hearing, and we're starting to hear now, and again, they said this at the indictment, they said this at the conviction, they said this at E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit. They said, no, now you done it. We automatically win now in November. You just gave it to us. And I said in the TikTok, I said, you said that after the indictments, after Eugene Carroll, you said that after the conviction. For people that seem confident about winning, you seem to keep telling us that, okay, now we won, like you were uncertain about it. We know who you are. You know you're going to lose. And they want to try to convince people that because you did something bad to us, which we didn't, that all of a sudden you fucked up because now we're going to win. In my wildest dreams, I don't think this has any bearing on the election. It might embolden the people that support Donald Trump, but that's not going to get them more votes. The other people with the talk of the stage thing, and just by virtue of people knowing who Donald Trump is, people on the left aren't going to feel sorry for him and say, "Oh, we gotta vote for Donald Trump now." That's not going to happen. It's not going to affect the election at all. Plus, it's 4 months out, and we know more crazy shit's going to happen between now and then.
Unless this somehow changes Donald Trump's entire policy platform and he completely changes his tune, which I don't expect to happen.
No.
But if his policy platform doesn't do like a 180-degree turn and go completely opposite of everything he said, this doesn't help.
Well, even if he did try to do that, and honestly, Donald Trump's not capable of that. He's not capable of thinking and coming up with a strategy. He speaks off the top of his head. It spews out his mouth like diarrhea. He doesn't think about what he says. But the fact of the matter is, there's another consideration, even if he changes his tune. We all know quite well that he's a pathological liar. I mean, give you an example Project 2025. He says, I don't know anything about that. I have no idea who's running that. Yet his name shows up in the document, the 900-page document, 300 times. Says, I didn't know Jeffrey Epstein. I have no idea who Jeffrey Epstein is. But when the documents from the grand jury in Florida come out, he's in there 69 times. We know he's a fucking liar. Everyone knows he's a liar. Now, the base might just go along with everything he says, but really normal, intelligent people aren't buying anything that comes out of his mouth.
No, and even the ones I talk to who aren't overly political, when I just tell them the tidbits that I know, they're like, "Oh my God!" And he's running for president.
Right.
He's like, I told the one guy at work the other day because we talk politics sometimes. He agrees with me most of the time, but we don't talk a lot, and he doesn't follow it religiously. But I told him about just a portion of what Donald Trump was in the Epstein files for from that case.
Yeah.
His eyes went about yay wide, and he's like, really? And he's still running. I go, yeah, because it's a cult.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a friend of mine. He was a business partner. We're actually pretty good friends. He always likes the fact that we're different attitudes in politics, but we're still friends. And we don't really talk politics. He's not a Trump fan. He knows Trump is a piece of shit, but he considered himself a Republican. And I always ask him, why are you a Republican? You're not that rich. You do all right, but you're not that rich. Why would you be a Republican? And what I gathered from talking to him, and again, he's a friend, so I'm not yelling at him. He's not yelling at me. Just completely unaware of anything that's legit. I said to him, we were talking about the shooting. He was upset about the shooting. And I said, well, thank goodness, or the Republicans will be disappointed that he was a white, straight, non-immigrant registered Republican. He said, why would that matter, him being white? I said, because you motherfucking Republicans are racist as shit. He goes, well, I don't think that. I think that was a problem back in the day, but I think it's gotten better. I go, son, you have not been paying attention. You have not been reading. And then I gave him some examples. And he said, well, maybe some of the Republicans are. I don't think Donald Trump is. I said, please, motherfucker, You got to be smarter than this. I was a business partner with you. Had I known that you didn't know anything, I would have never partnered with you. And so I gave him, we were texting and I gave him a rundown of Project 2025 and, and Jeffrey Epstein and the 34 felony charges and the stealing of the documents and giving them to the Russians. I gave them this long text, and he had been going back and forth with me. After I gave him that long text, I didn't hear from him for a while. And we're supposed to go out to dinner with he and his wife, my wife and his wife. His only comeback was, "Well, we'll see you next Thursday. We're going to have a good time at the dinner and all this stuff." I honestly think he had no idea of any of those things, and that's where the problem lies.
Oh yeah, the right side media does not report any sort of fact, truth. They haven't for a long time.
No.
It's been mostly rhetoric. And I've talked about it before. Like my dad, he'll turn on Fox News because it says news. He doesn't pick up on the fact that it's not news.
Yeah.
It's mostly bullshit.
Yeah.
And no idea that they settled for $800 and some million in the defamation case against Dominion Voting, that they've got a $2.2 million defamation case coming.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, this is what I've said before. People always talk about how this country is divided, and I honestly put most of the blame on the media. And I've said it before because no matter who you are, whatever media you watch, you're getting a different story than somebody else watching a different media outlet. I mean, it can be Fox to MSNBC, but fuck, it can be MSNBC to CNN. You're getting two different versions of it. And that is the problem. We all have different stories. We don't know everything. We don't have the facts on it. We get slants one way or another. And I make the left just as guilty as, well, maybe not as guilty as the right, but they are problematic. And that is probably the core reason why we are divided in this country. Nobody has the same story.
Well, exactly. And I kind of was irritated as I was looking for other stories to do TikToks on for the last 2 weeks. Top story on both CNN and MSNBC was something covering Joe Biden needs to step down. Oh, another person called for it. Oh, this or that, or why Joe Biden can't make it, or why Kamala Harris couldn't win if she ran, or why Michelle Obama would be a good replacement, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating when they buried in their one of the days, Jim Banks, who wasn't allowed to sit on the January 6th committee because he was under suspicion for being involved.
Right.
And is still a sitting member of Congress, has been asked 4 different times if he thinks an armed rebellion is necessary in this country. And he couldn't answer the goddamn question.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
That's buried halfway down the webpage on MSNBC.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that the media is doing us any favors. I think they are trying to fuel the flames as opposed to giving us the facts. And they want to fuel the flames because it's beneficial to them, that they will make money off of it by getting people afraid and watching endlessly just to try to quell their fears. And unfortunately, the media is not going to help them in that regard. They want to keep them afraid.
Yeah, I steal your boxing analogy all the time. But the media, if they looked at this fight logically, this would be a fight where you have the heavyweight champ against somebody who's never boxed a match or maybe one match in his life.
Right.
And who is going to be knocked out in the first 60 to 90 seconds tops.
Right.
Tops. And it's not going to be a fight, but they're going to, they're stretching out, man, it's going to be a good fight. If the contender could just keep his hooks up and, duck and jab and stay out of the way, man, he could go the distance. He could go 12 rounds. This could come down to a judge's decision. And they're just feeding you full of shit so you tune in and watch the fight.
Right. They're trying to sell tickets and they're not telling you the truth about what in fact is going on. And that's the unfortunate thing. There were days when I was young when you could get the facts and the truth from the news. Nobody's giving you the full facts. Nobody's giving you the full story. They're giving you the story they want you to hear that's going to be beneficial to them. And that is a disservice to this country. I don't know how we fix something like that unless we go back and somehow reinstate the fairness doctrine. That's something Ronald Reagan got rid of. You know,
That would help.
people always recall the days when somebody would come on and say something and then somebody else would say, you got to give us equal time. That was kind of where the fairness doctrine was. So there was some accountability for telling the truth. Well, when Ronald Reagan got rid of it, they could do whatever they want. And, you know, it's funny. I think the moment in time, there was a time with news, it was kind of a lost leader for networks. They weren't making money off of it. It wasn't entertaining. It wasn't sexy. They couldn't sell a lot of advertising for it. But I think the turning point was the Iran hostage crisis, you know, that ended after Ronald Reagan came in and we found out he kind of fixed that situation. But when that started, there was a special program that was on nightly. I think it was nightly, called, what was it? I want to say Newsline, but that's not it. It's uh, Koppel, Tom Koppel, I think his name was. Um, Probably got that wrong, and I should know that.
Was it
But
Dateline?
Not Dateline. I'm going to look it up here because I should fucking know this. But if I don't come up with an answer here, I'm almost certainly going to have people telling me I should step aside. Let's see here. It's Ted Koppel. And Ted Koppel was actually a very good newsman. Let me just check it here. Nightline. It was Nightline. And Nightline was a show that was just kind of pulled out of their asses to cover this Iran crisis. But then it became kind of a news magazine of sorts. And after the crisis, it was so successful that they continued on talking about other news stories, and it ran for years and years. It might be still running for all as I know. But that was the moment in time when they realized we can make money from news. And since it was around the time of Reagan and they got rid of the fairness doctrine, now it could be an entertainment program. And they started making money off of it and they fucking ran with it. And unfortunately, 40 years later, here we are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, news was never meant to be, you know, a moneymaker for anybody. It was, you're supposed to report what happens.
Right.
And, you know, and tell people mostly the truth.
Right.
Let people make their own decision. Too many people get their own spin on it and they hire people who get their own spin on it. But I also think some of these people, they jump from place to place to place. And, you know, in a year, you could see, what's his name? Tucker
Right.
Carlson. You could see him on CNN. They could hire him tomorrow and he could be spinning left wing, you know, pro Biden stuff.
Right.
You know, he's not as big on his convictions or whatever that he sells these people. He's just a good showman.
Right. We don't have newsmen or newswomen or journalists. We have personalities. That's all we fucking have right now, unfortunately. Eric, we're going to take a quick break. We'll take a quick break and we will be right back. We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Eric from Iowa is a co-host today. We're talking about, well, we spent a lot of time talking about the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. And frankly, I'd like to get away from it. We spent a lot of time talking about whether we should have Joe step aside. And then all of a sudden this shooting happens. As I predicted, there'd be another shiny object or another squirrel for the dog to look at since Cecilia's there.
Yep.
So,
there she is.
There she is. Cecilia, squirrel.
She doesn't react to that word.
She doesn't give a shit about squirrels. She's busier doing other things. But you know what I mean? You know, people were really concerned, and I was a little concerned that the Democrats got caught up in trying to push Joe out. Joe kept putting on a good presentation every time he spoke. And he said, no, I'm not going. And he's the one that makes the final choice. And it was really a waste of time because while they should have been pounding on Donald Trump for all the crimes and corruption that he's committing, they were focusing on trying to push Joe out. Now that this assassination attempt has happened, obviously the attention's going to be on that, not so much putting Joe under the microscope. I heard somewhere, and I'm just wondering if you heard this, that some of the leadership said you need to stand down on this Joe thing. It ain't working for you in your favor, and Joe's not going to fucking go.
I hadn't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
No, that would be the smart thing to do.
One thing I've said in my TikToks, and I was doing it almost daily saying Joe should stay, is I don't care if Joe can finish his 4-year term.
No, neither do I.
If he can't finish it, we have Kamala Harris. That's the whole point of having a vice president. I'm voting for them as a team and the cabinet they're going to put in place. But on top of that, if Joe is so weak, so feeble, and so incompetent and incapable of running the presidential race from now to November, then they either need to get him to agree to resign, or Kamala needs to step in with the 25th Amendment and have him forced out and take over as president, and she needs to run. If he can't run the presidential race for the next 5 months, he shouldn't be president.
Well, and that's
what effectively what these people are saying.
Well, that's what I've said too. I said, if that's the case, there's a lot we don't know because that hasn't been revealed to us. I said, the only time I would say Joe should step down is if there's something we don't know. Seeing what I've seen, yeah, the debate was bad, but everything since then I've been pretty solid with. He's been slow, but nobody knows more shit than Joe at this point. He's probably the most experienced man in all of Washington right now. And he's talking some pretty serious facts. And if we're going to deal with foreign policy or local stuff, domestic stuff, he's the guy to fucking do it. He may be slow, but he's the president and he knows what's going on. He knows how the game is played.
Oh, exactly. And but like I said, if he is so bad, like some of these people are saying, they're implying he can't finish a presidential race that's in 4 months, 4 months, then he shouldn't be president. But you're right. He knows more than anybody. He highlighted that at his press conference right after the NATO summit.
Right.
He listed off all the people he said, not even all, some of the people he's talked to, some of the people he's known that he's met. He has so many ties and his Rolodex is so deep. Now, there's a term for a lot of the younger people won't have a clue what we mean by that.
No, they won't.
But, he will be able to go to his contacts and go, hey, how many times have I helped you out with this? Cut me some slack here.
Right.
And he's able to work deals like they used to.
Well, and the thing about it is these people, these Democrats that are trying to push Joe out, the media makes it sound like it's this huge group of people that are trying to get him out of running in November. There are 17 members of the House of Representatives, and people have come to me saying, there's 17 members. That's impossible to overcome. Yeah, well, if we remind you that there's 213 representatives, it's a small percentage of the group of people that want him out. Then they tell us that Joe Biden is tanking in the polls. I don't trust polls, but if that's the only thing we're dealing with in this situation, he's not tanking in the polls. He stayed pretty much even, maybe gone up in some cases. So why are these motherfuckers lying to us? If you're lying to me now, I don't trust you for anything.
Yeah, well, as far as the polls go, one of the downsides, and I haven't looked into how a lot of these polls are conducted, but I remember reading about one of them, and they were calling people with landlines.
Right.
Well, who the fuck has a landline anymore? Old people in rural areas who tend to vote Republican.
Right.
That have never left their small town.
I honestly don't believe the polls tell us anything. If I look at the facts of the baggage that Donald Trump has to carry into that election and the success that Joe Biden has had and the fear people have of Donald Trump, I don't see how Joe Biden doesn't win in a landslide. And I know people think I'm crazy because of the polls, but we'll wait and see. It's going to be a decisive win for Joe Biden. It can't be anything but.
Well, I've said it. I think there's some states that are in play for Joe Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida,
I think
Arizona.
Florida, Texas, Missouri, maybe even Arkansas.
If
And
any, if any one of those, if Florida goes the way of Biden, it's over.
yeah, Texas, if
Texas
Texas
too.
flipped. And in part, I thought Texas was in play prior to the hurricane, but then you have this hurricane hit. Abbott's in China, or he's in Asia somewhere. The lieutenant governor can't be found to answer a phone call from Joe Biden to get them the aid they need. And you know,
Well, I was going to tell you, you brought up Texas, and it's kind of timely. Old Soul, regular guest on the show. She sticks her nose into any place somebody needs help,
oh
and
yeah,
she's down in Texas now, helping abused women deal with the aftermath of the hurricane. And I said, "Old, you got to text me now and again to make sure you're okay. You're a young black woman who supports abortion, and you're going down there and helping abused women. I don't think this is the safest place for you to be." But she hadn't listened to me. She does whatever the hell she wants. She hadn't listened to her family. But I said, she wrote me this text. She says, "Hey, Boomer, I'm checking to see how you're doing. I can only imagine your comment section looks like, or how are you holding up?" She's wondering how I'm holding up. She's down in Texas dealing with hurricane victims, and she's wondering how I'm doing. I said, "I'm
that
actually
sounds like
good."
her.
I said, "I'm actually good. How you doing?" She says, "Same, busy. People are without power. I've never seen anything like this. They knew Beryl was coming. I don't know why they weren't prepared. They didn't do anything to prepare." Um, um, she says, "I have a roomie. She's pretty cool. She told me a minute ago, so much for presidents having absolute immunity." I don't even know what that means really. But anyway, I said, "It sounds like you're going to be dealing with a lot of intellectual folks down there in Texas." And she said, "Yeah, most of the people here are talking about Greg Abbott. He should be afraid to go in public the way people here talk about him." And that's interesting. He gets elected all the time. But when you put people in the situation they're currently in, like the situation they were in that winter when the grid went down, people aren't going to like Greg Abbott, especially when they know he spent 2 weeks in fucking Asia while they're sitting there suffering. So we could see a blue switch there.
Exactly. And even if they don't flip down ticket, if they only flip the presidential race, that's big for Joe Biden and the Democrats. If Joe Biden flips, if he not only wins the presidency, but if he flips even one or two red strongholds, if he flips Arkansas, Missouri, Florida, Texas, or something like that, on top of just winning even one state more than he won last time, and it's one of the big ones, that's a mandate that the people want him to do good things for this country.
Well, absolutely. If he flips just Florida or just Texas, that's an insurmountable situation for Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's going to have troubles now. He doesn't have a unified party. He can't count on all the Republicans voting for him, and he can't count on most of the independents. Just those two data points make it impossible for him to win the election.
Well, just off the top of my head, I know Florida, Missouri, possibly Arkansas, Arizona, and I'm thinking there's one more, all have ballot measures on the ballot this November for I take that back. Arkansas is trying to get it there. They're
Right.
going to have ballot measures to overturn or to restore Roe v. Wade, basically. Arkansas is being held out right now. They had all the signatures, but the Secretary of State saying there's a paperwork issue.
Of course.
And I don't know if they have time to fix it or not, but they're suing to try to force him to put it back on the ballot.
Right. Well, Florida has it on the ballot, and that is a devastating loss for the Republicans because it's going to drag people out to the polls that maybe wouldn't have shown up. They're going to vote to uphold abortion in their state. They're down to 6 weeks now. It's essentially an abortion ban, and they've got 70 to 75% of their state that support Roe v. Wade. This isn't good news for the Republicans. They're going to go vote to maintain or okay Roe v. Wade in their state, and they're going to be pissed off at the Republicans because they're the ones that put them in that position. That's where Donald Trump could lose Florida easily.
Well, and it realistically, not only are they going to probably turn out to support this ballot measure, but the ones that turn out, they can flip the presidential races. And then you're talking down ballot. You're talking state, and not even just federal down ballot, state ballots, local reps. The ones that put these bans in place could be in major jeopardy. You could see some state houses flip.
Well, and I think that's what people miss. You know, they talk about polls, but we're seeing a lot of movement to the left in, you know, special elections and those sorts of things. People are really feeling the pinch of this draconian shit that the Republicans are putting on them. It's not about parties anymore. It's about people making their lives more difficult or more dangerous. You know, the whole shooting aspect of it. You know, I told a joke. I told a joke. I told you in the text when I first heard Donald Trump was shot at, I made some jokes. We didn't know at that point that the shooter was done, dead. We didn't know that at the time. And I said to my brother, I said, well, I sure hope to God they treat that shooter with kid gloves because he's got his Second Amendment rights. He had an AR-15 and they killed him. And that's fine. And this is the most tragic day. Let's forget about Uvalde, Columbine, the nightclub, all this shit. They don't care about that shit. Their one guy alleges to get hit by a bullet in the ear, and now the world is shattered. It won't change their mind on the NRA, and that's another big issue. The gun issue is huge in this country right now.
Well, Joe Biden said he wants to reban assault weapons like he did. He said he helped ban them the first time. He'll do it again.
Majority of people want it.
And I saw somebody on TikTok say he should pass some gun reform legislation, including assault weapons ban, and name it the Trump something or other, but put Trump's name on it and watch all these Republicans have to vote against it.
Well, you know, I've said this about Joe Biden. I was hoping this, and I'm starting to get an indication that he may be on this track. Joe's always been known as a centrist. And that's why the wealthy have kind of make him palatable for them because he's more conservative for a Democrat or has been. And all these Democrats that are in the pockets of the wealthy people, they supported Joe. Up until recently, when they want him to step aside, they want somebody they can control in there now because Joe's talking about raising taxes on rich people, cutting taxes on the middle class, forgiving loans, building up Medicare, doing all this shit.
Raising the minimum wage, eliminating.
And the rich people are freaking out about this shit.
The big one, he wants to not eliminate medical debt, but make it so it cannot appear on your credit report.
He already did that. He already accomplished that.
But I think he wants to actually pass it into law so that way the Supreme Court can't use this latest Chevron ruling or whatever where they overturn the Chevron ruling to say, well, nope, that doesn't apply. He wants to get it codified to give them another roadblock.
My point is that he's a centrist, so he isn't really hardcore liberal or hasn't been. But I said, if this guy gets in for a second term, and maybe he only stays in for 2 years, if he does all the things he wants to do, he will go down in history right at the same level with FDR. He could change his I mean, he's already done a great job doing things for the middle class, but he could take it home in the first 2 years and leave there as a fucking hero of the people.
Well, I've said that numerous times on this show. I think Joe Biden is going to try to get everything he can done in his first 2 years. And as long as he's got a favorable Congress to leave Kamala, he is going to step out after the midterms. He'll give her just under 2 full years. That way she can still run 2 years of her own term. And I could be wrong. He could end up serving all 4. But I could see him right under the 2-year mark, resigning, letting her take over. And then she's got 2 years basically to run with as the incumbent going into 2028. She can pick her own VP. She's younger. She's closer to the pulse of the country, and they can get a lot done. And he set the next generation up to succeed, and he has still been that transitional president.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing that people maybe don't understand. If she took over at the 2-year point, she can run in 2028, and she can also run in 2032. She can run for election in 2 full terms, even though she served 2 terms of Joe's term. So theoretically, she could be in there for 10 years. I'll be dead by then.
As long as she takes over after, what is it, January 22nd, 2027? Yeah. January 22nd, 21st or 22nd, 2027.
Oh, I didn't know that was a criteria. That's something I wasn't aware of that. She can only finish out so much time that
She
so
can
it allows her to run 2 full terms.
8 years. It's 2 terms or 10 years if you have finished out a previous term. So if Joe Biden takes the oath of office January 20th, 2025, and January 21st resigns, she would be considered taking up his whole term. She'd only get one of her own. Because of they give vice presidents that assume the presidency 2 extra years, up to 2 years of their predecessor's term. So it's like, what is it? Is it the 20th or the 21st when he takes the oath of office? Whichever date that is. It basically be the day after, and then 2 years. 2 years in.
I gotcha. I just want to see how old she is. She's not that old. I think she's younger than me. She's 59. So if she goes 4 more years, she's 63. And then if she did 1 term after that, she'd be 67. I think that's old enough, I mean,
it really depends on how good she's doing, how good her, depends on if she's eligible for that 3rd potential term and how good things are going under her. But you have the potential to set her up if they get a bunch done in his first 2 years and we reelect Democrats in the midterm and she's got a favorable Congress where she could take over at the midway point.
Right.
She could start enacting some of the progressive stuff that Joe didn't want to touch.
Right.
And at that point, the conservatives are cooked.
Yeah, they are cooked. And that's one of the things I didn't understand until I looked at it deeper. I'm thinking to myself, you want to have Joe step aside and run Kamala. And I thought that mainly because that's the only real option. Why not just run Joe, go off his great track record, go off the fact that Donald Trump is the absolute worst presidential candidate from a major party in the history of this country, have Joe win, have Joe step aside in 2 years, then you got Kamala Harris. But the problem is these wealthy Democrats that wanted Joe step aside, they wanted him to step aside and bring somebody else in, which is a complete insult to Kamala Harris. And they wanted to run somebody else in there. And so we've got Democrats freaking out because they've got donors that are freaking out and telling them, we got to get them out of there. We got to get them out of there. I think we're done with that now, unless something happens between now and the election. I think they've got to step back and focus on winning the election as opposed to fighting amongst themselves.
Oh, I agree. And Joe made a good point at his press conference at the NATO summit. When somebody asked about it, he's like, we've got, and he said he didn't want to give the wrong number. And I don't know how many field offices it is in swing states, but he's got all of his field offices set up in every area where he thinks he can win. They've got the infrastructure for the ground campaign going already. Why 4 months to the election would you want to switch that? Well, they're risking it for no reason.
Yeah. That's the funny thing. I heard a representative, Adam something, and he was saying, well, I think Joe could beat Donald Trump, but why risk it? And I'm thinking to myself, why risk it? Are you telling me pulling somebody out of a fucking hat and running them with 4 months lead time? That's not a bigger risk? That's a ridiculous gaslighting statement. I don't even understand where they're coming from there.
I think they're worried that the crowd of people against Joe is bigger than they thought. But Old Soul, I believe, mentioned it, and I agree with Old Soul, is that there's a bunch of never Trumpers that can tolerate Joe Biden
Yeah.
because he's a centrist. They might hold their nose and vote for Joe because he's a centrist and he's not far right. But you bring in a Bernie, you bring in, maybe Gavin Newsom or whoever, somebody farther left, and they won't be able to hold their nose and vote for a Democrat.
Right.
They're going to have to vote either for third party or vote for Donald Trump or not vote.
But I don't think there's going to be a third party. RFK Jr. is pretty much as damaged as you can be. I don't know who's going to vote for that dumb motherfucker. But even Bernie Sanders kind of endorsed Joe Biden too. He's saying enough of this bullshit. This is fucking ridiculous. We're fighting against ourselves. We need to make sure Joe gets elected. And he said the same thing that all of us have said. This isn't about Joe and Donald Trump. This is about democracy and fascism. It's as simple as that. You may not like Joe Biden, but can you tolerate Joe Biden to avoid fascism? At least with Joe Biden, at some point, you'll get a chance to change things the way you want it. Donald Trump gets in, you're fucked. You got nothing. You're never going to get anything.
Yeah, I saw a MAGA troll that I ended up blocking on TikTok, but they made a post saying, well, Donald Trump should pick Donald Trump Jr. to be his running mate, finish out his term, then Jr. can run for 2 full terms, and their math is off because they're a MAGA fuck and education's hard. But then they said, well, when Jr. runs his 2 terms, he can have Barron be his VP, and then Barron can run. And there you go. You got 20 years of a Trump in the White House. Perfect solution.
And what you're talking about is a monarchy, which is tantamount to a dictatorship.
Yeah.
So it's so ridiculous. I hear these people after this shooting. Oh yeah, we're going to win now. 90% of this country is going to vote for Donald Trump now. That might be a little exaggerated. I don't think 90% of the people are going to vote for anybody specifically, and Donald Trump's going to be lucky if he gets close to 50%, because I don't think he'll get that.
Well, and even if you look at some of the deep red states where like Donald Trump will carry the state, he doesn't carry any state by 90%.
No.
He like some of his best states, he's carrying by 60 to 65, top end.
In the primaries, he can't take 90% from Nikki Haley, and she's not even fucking running.
Right.
And then what do they do? What do they do?
Huh?
Nikki Haley begrudgingly sends her delegates or suggests her delegates to go to the RNC convention, and then they tell her she's not invited because Donald Trump is butthurt that she said the things she said.
Well, I heard now that they've turned around and they've actually offered her to come, but I don't think she's going.
I wouldn't go.
After it kind of blew up in their face that she released her delegates to go, and that story kind of blew up in Republicans' faces that she wasn't even invited, as she had delegates to the convention.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, I heard a while back that some of the delegates in a couple states were trying to find ways of nominating anybody else other than Trump, even if they were pledged for Trump. So there could be a fight on the convention floor yet.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that you bring it up, because as this podcast is airing, the RNC convention starting today, Monday. I'm not so sure what's going to happen there. They could have a lot of problems. Donald Trump already said Milwaukee sucks, and I know Wisconsinites, and they don't take kindly to that shit. You got a bunch of Republicans that are aggressive and tend toward violence and they're drinking and doing all the stuff. This could be kind of a shit show, especially if there's any pushback against Donald Trump. And since we don't have a unified party, there could be some pushback.
Well, and on top of it, I had heard a story right before we got on here that they said they're not changing any of the security for the convention.
Yeah.
Nothing's changing. So, like you said, you got some drunk, rowdy Trump-la-fucks. Who knows what might happen?
Well, and and I'm not saying this to begrudge Wisconsin. I actually like the state of Wisconsin. I don't like some people in it, mostly those that go to sporting events, because that's a whole fucking different vibe. You know that from being in Iowa. You've probably been to some games with some Wisconsinites. It's fucking crazy. But couple of things you've got to remember about Wisconsin. In all the polls I've ever seen, the drunkest state in the country is Wisconsin. And it makes sense because of the beer in Milwaukee and all that stuff. But it's also an open carry state. So this could get a little crazy. I know they're trying to tighten things up around Milwaukee during the convention, but a lot of people have guns. It's open carry and they're the drunkest state. There was a joke a comedian said one time. He was talking about a baseball game. And you know how they have the bat day and the hat day and disco night and all the stuff. He goes, yeah, we got a big show coming. We got a big event tonight. We got the ball game between Cleveland and Chicago. And don't forget, it's handgun and hard liquor night. That's kind of what it's going to be over at the RNC convention.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. It's going to be interesting to see what they actually do. I think Joe Biden did the right thing right before the convention. He laid out his groundwork for his 100 days. He said he's going to be having more campaign stops during their convention, trying to get some of the press off of them and on to him, talking about what he's going to accomplish. And I think if he's talking of his accomplishments, and as long as he's clear during their convention, I think the media is going to cover snippets of him and doing things like that, but they're not going to be as hard pressed on him. They're going to be focused on the convention, focused on Donald Trump, especially if there's any sort of a problem at the convention. If this thing breaks down to a brokered convention where they don't nominate Donald Trump first ballot, the media is going to have a field day.
Well, I personally think that if he continues to go out and give his speeches and do well, that's great. But I think the media is going to be focused pretty hard on Joe Biden because of that shooting in Pennsylvania. They're going to see the former president being put in a situation with a shooter, and they're thinking, oh, those fucking Republicans, they're looking for retribution or maybe a copycat or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen with Joe because he's got the protection and he's smart. But I know the media just wants to be on top of a potential tragedy. So they will probably be focusing on Joe Biden, which will benefit him.
Well, what I mean by it, I don't think they're going to be focusing on him, is he's not going to be the lead. Like, they're going to be covering what he's doing, but he's not going to be the lead story. The lead story, unless something crazy happens with Joe, is it's going to be what's going down at the convention.
Right.
Like, they're still going to cover him, but he's not going to be top of the news cycle for 2 weeks. Speaking of, thought just popped in my head as I was saying that. Not to throw a conspiracy theory out there about the shooting, but prior to the shooting, for about 15 days, Donald Trump's name wasn't top of the news cycle.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if the malignant narcissist that is Donald Trump wanted to get his name back in the top of the news cycle, is that something he possibly would consider doing? He makes himself look like some kind of a martyr, but puts himself right back to being the top person everybody's talking about. Feeds his ego.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you can expect him doing something crazy when the DNC is running next month. He's going to try to steal the attention away. But he also made a Truth Social mention. What was the phrase he used about January 6th? That just before January.
It's going to be wild.
It's going to be wild. He did the same thing prior to this rally speech. He said, could be a big announcement. He's teasing people to try to get this VP thing. But it's interesting that he used that same phrase that he used on January 6th, and then we get a shooting. Um, uh, this whole thing about his vice president, people are all saying, who's going to be the vice president? For me, I don't give a fuck. It doesn't matter who he picks. It's going to be a dipshit. They can't help him. And honestly, for as bad as he is, they can't even hurt him. It's going to be a nobody. It's going to be a lapdog that he can boss around. And that's not a big deal.
There's only a couple scenarios where I care who his vice president is. And the first one I don't see happening is if he picks somebody actually strong and knowledgeable,
Not going to happen.
which that's a counter to everything he is. He wants a yes man or a yes woman. He wants somebody who's going to kowtow to him and say how smart he is and pat him on the ass. The only other time I really care about who his VP would be is if, and I can only hope that he picks Kim Reynolds of Iowa and she's no longer my governor.
That would be good. That would be
good for me. And that's the only other time I really care. I mean, because all the names getting thrown out, Marco Rubio, JD Vance, Doug Burgum from North Dakota, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
Although JD Vance, let's see. He's in Ohio, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And that's a Republican governor, so we wouldn't get that seat back.
No, that's something he's got to consider too, is if they move a senator out, he's going to get replaced and they better have a Republican governor or they're fucked. Donald Trump may not care. But, you said if he gets somebody good and somebody strong, do you really think somebody legitimate would even take that offer? I don't think so. They'd be foolish to do that.
The only reason I could see somebody strong taking it is if they knew for a fact and somehow it inside information, which, I mean, they shouldn't have at this point, that Donald Trump would not make it to election or to either election day or
Right.
to take to inauguration day.
Well, I think a lot of people have been considering that. I think Nikki Haley thought that.
I think a few people might have still been in the race, Nikki Haley included, for being the VP pick up until this Supreme Court decision came out and they kicked his sentencing for his 34 felonies down to September. If his sentencing would have been 4 days ago, well, if they would have known, hey, he's going to prison or he's under house arrest, well, two things. One, he wouldn't have gotten shot if he was under house arrest or if he was in prison.
Right.
But then somebody else would have said, yeah, I'll be his VP because he's in prison. He won't be able to run.
Right.
We won't nominate him.
Well, we're mid-July now, so we're maybe a month and a half, 2 months before September. I think people think that sentencing in September is just a throwaway. Nothing's going to happen. And I disagree completely. I think he's going to get sentenced to some jail time. I think he will.
I think he almost has to.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 34 felony convictions. That's a lot. And granted, they're all for fraud. But then you look at, he just got found civilly liable for decades of fraud involving banks and businesses and loans and taxes.
Right.
I mean, the judge has to weigh all of that, not to mention he's thumbed his nose at the judge at every possible turn and has muddied this thing up and made it completely ridiculous. Unless the judge errs on the side of caution with this immunity appeal and says, well, no, we got to go back, have a new trial because you can't have the stuff with Hope Hicks, which he was in the White House, and this other person who was in the White House. You can't have those two records from while he was in the White House or his talking to them when he was the president. That falls under it. Unless he errs on the side of caution and does something like that, there's nothing in the immunity thing, and the judge is going to be pissed for Donald Trump wasting his time.
Right. And the fact of the matter is they haven't determined yet what's official and what's not official. That's on Judge Chutkan. He was convicted before that Supreme Court decision came, and he needs to be sentenced. If he wants to use it in appeal, cool. But he's going to get sentenced, and it's going to be done, and there won't be another delay.
Yeah, I think the judge is going to eventually rule against him on this
Absolutely
immunity thing, saying, well, none of that was relevant to you being president. This was all personal business. So all of it's out. All of it, none of your appeal's done. It's over.
Yeah, just because
Let's
you were
move on.
sitting in the Oval Office or somewhere in the White House doesn't make it official business. When you take a shit in the Oval Office, that isn't official business. I'm just saying.
The funny thing is, I was gonna make a similar analogy.
I'm sure you were, but I thought I'd grab the joke before anybody else did. It just came in my head. I said, fuck it. I'm saying it. It's my show. I'll do whatever the fuck I want.
Sometimes we think too alike. It's a little scary.
Yeah. 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 It's a little weird. I'm glad there's more people that aren't offended by some of the things I say. I get away with a lot. You know, people have said that to me about TikTok. How do you swear so much? And I don't know. I've just always done it. I think they figured, like my parents and like my bosses and like my wife thinks, we can't stop him anyway. He's just going to fucking do it. So you might as well let him.
Well, I think part of it, and I think the other part is typically it's the people on the right who disagree with you that
Yeah.
will report you and block you. Like I noted with all of his coverage of the shooting, that Hawk put all of his posts the last couple of days on friends only or followers only. That way he didn't get hit with all the Trumplafucks trying to take him down over them having a difference of opinion because they're getting nuts over it. I mean, I think you blocking all the Trumplafucks helps. I try to do the same thing. If I see him come through, nope. You leave
Yeah.
one comment, out, done.
I think that's a smart thing to do, and I just did it because I didn't want the hassle. It was no great strategy, but yeah, Hawk is. I like Hawk, and for those folks that don't know who he is, he's kind of a little younger. He's about 10 years younger than I am, and he's got a full head of hair. For that reason, I don't like him. But you know, he's a smart guy. He's a lawyer, and I've gotten a lot of good information from him, and I know you have too. But he's going through some shit. He doesn't. I don't think he blocks all of the Trumplafucks, but then he comes out and agrees that Joe should step aside, and then the fucking Democrats hit him hard, and then he talks about the shooting, and then the Republicans hit him hard, and then he goes on friends only. I don't know how he deals with this. He's gone through this a lot of times over the whole time. He's been on probably as long as I have, and he's gone through some trials and tribulations, and I haven't. And the only thing different I can see is I block Trumplafucks.
You block Trumplafucks and you block people who become adversarial,
Right.
like extremely adversarial with you, even if they're Democrats.
Oh yeah.
If they get too bad, out they go before they start risking your platform. And he's one of the ones that he'll, unless they get really, really bad, I don't think he blocks them. And then he turns their comments into content, and he engages with them and mocks them and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not
I
saying he
don't do
brings
that.
it on himself, but
Kind of does.
that doesn't help.
Yeah. You'll never see me take a comment from a Trumplafuck, put it up on the screen and talk shit about that guy. That's like begging them to have you violated for some fucking bullying or harassing. It's
Right.
just asking for it. And people say, well, you're just afraid to debate with them. I go, well, you can't debate with them. And I think the message we're putting out with Rational Boomer is more important than whatever argument or debate I can have with a dipshit that will never get it.
Exactly. I mean, what I do is after, like, I'll read their comment, and if I think it's important to talk about whatever they might have said, I'll remember what they said, block them, and then I'll do a video. Hey, I had a Trump humper come to my page. They were saying this. Well, hey, let's talk about it. And I break down what they were saying, and I defeat their argument. But I've already blocked them, and I don't give their account any sort of interaction.
Yeah.
They're just blocked.
I used to do that too, but the problem with that is what they'll do is they'll create some dummy account and they'll show up anyway, and then they'll violate you. So I just don't even deal with them. I don't mention them. I don't talk to them. I don't do anything. And you know, frankly, if I didn't block all the Trumplafucks, I'd probably have many followers as Hawk does. but that's not why I'm
Probably
doing
more.
it. I don't really care about that. The fact that I have the many followers I have is just how fucking outrageous to me. Never expected that. I like to look at the people who are peers. Actually, I call them on TikTok. It may not be the biggest, but it's the best quality. Because
Yeah.
if you look at the comments, we're all in the same mindset.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Like I block a lot of the Trump humpers. I block any of the ones that are obviously fakes of a celebrity,
Yeah.
fakes of your account, any of the other bigger creators that I follow. I've gotten several that have been fakes. Like the other night, I messaged you after your live.
Right.
While you were on live doing your live, I had a rational boomer add me. Nope, I knew it wasn't you. Immediately got blocked. But if I didn't eliminate all the scammers and the fake accounts, I'd probably be up over 5,000 by now.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least
Exactly.
that's what it feels like.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, I was looking at one of my posts. I usually go through the comments while it's still easy enough to do, while there's not so many, just to kind of weed through the Trumplafucks. I found a fucking imposter in the comments of my fucking post.
Yeah,
That's
I pointed one out to you.
audacity. That's audacity.
Because you
Fuck.
posted something like you replied to somebody's comment, and then like under that, like they replied, then the imposter replied to their reply to you, and it's like, Jesus Christ,
Right.
these
Exactly.
people have no shame.
That's a
But
set of cojones, I got to tell you.
yeah, speaking of cojones, AOC, her coming out with articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. I don't know if they're going to go anywhere because they got to get out of the Judiciary Committee with Jim Jordan.
It'll never pass the House in the current condition.
They only need 2 Republicans, though. And apparently she's laid it out. She has laid a case from
Yeah.
what the articles I'm reading
Well,
listed out.
the case is legit. I mean, he should be impeached.
But I mean, she's laid a strong enough case, and it is going to be hard for some of these Republicans, especially some in swing districts, to defend not impeaching them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like she made a case.
Well, a lot of people say AOC should run for president. What you have to understand is she won't be old enough to run for president till like about 2 weeks before the election. We need her in the House, maybe the Senate at some point. We need her to get a little more seasoning, and she could be a prime candidate for president at some point. Her only failing point is she may be too progressive, and there may not be enough people who are willing to take that risk. But she's solid in the House, could be great in the Senate, and she might be a
Oh yeah.
presidential candidate at some point.
Oh yeah. I mean, she could do a great job. As we talked about one other time on your podcast, the Democratic bench is deep.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
very deep. There's tons of people. If this problem with Joe would have come up 2 years ago, they could have had 10 people
yeah.
that they could have potentially picked from and had somebody run and ran a good campaign, even if Kamala Harris didn't take up the mantle and she just finished out his term if he needed to, or whatever the case might be, or he just said, hey, I'm done, I'm only running one term, and Kamala didn't want to run. They could have 10 people easy.
Yeah.
Republicans, if it's not Donald Trump, their base, there's 30% of them that won't vote for anybody else.
Right, right. Well, that's what I've said. I'm not opposed to suggesting that Joe Biden's too old to be president. I thought that right after he was elected. I didn't think he'd be the nominee. And if 2 years ago they said, we're going to put somebody else in there, I would have been okay with it if Joe agreed to it. But 4 months out, it's too short a time. It's too risky.
Well, for me, if it would have been 2 years ago, my only issue with them putting anybody else in other than Joe is if Joe would have said, I'm not running, first choice should have automatically been Kamala, period,
Absolutely.
point blank. Because if Kamala said she's running and you had a bunch of Democrats trying to primary her, I'd be talking shit about the Democrats.
The thing is, you talk about old soul. We were talking about her earlier, and I think she was against the idea of Kamala running in place of Joe in 2024. She said, I know how the racism's going to be, and I don't think she can win. And on that particular topic, I tend to just, there will be some racism. I mean, that's inevitable, but I think she could win, to be perfectly honest. She's strong.
She might win, but the racism was already starting to show as the media was covering this whole thing about Joe not running and Kamala maybe running or whatever. I was seeing things on TikTok talking about, well, her parents weren't born here, even though, as they were showing her birth certificate from Oakland. She's not a citizen. She's not eligible to be president. Well, you dumb motherfucker. If she's not eligible to be president, how can she be vice president?
Yeah.
This would have been settled 3 years ago. Where was this argument 3 years ago? But you didn't care when she was vice president because to you, that's an unimportant position until something happens to the president.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I got one more inappropriate joke for you.
Go for it.
This isn't normally a paranormal show. There's plenty of paranormal podcasts out there. But I got a message from the ghost of John McCain. And he says he prefers presidents that don't get shot at. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Fitting.
that's that's a little tactless, but I've never said I had any tax, so I'm not surprised. Well, Eric, thanks very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I'm glad we had somebody to talk about as we go into the next week. God knows what the fuck is going to happen. Stay close so we know if we need you, you'll be there. I know you will. Tell folks how they can find you on TikTok and on YouTube, because people should check you out.
Well, thanks again for having me. I love being on the podcast. It's always a great time. And if you're looking for me over on either TikTok or YouTube, it is Analytical Iowan at both. Either one, I got the same name on both. Hopefully, I think I fixed it over there on YouTube where it's a little easier to find me. We'll see if it actually helps. I know some people have had trouble finding my link, but I've noticed in the comments of other times I've been on the podcast. So, yeah, Analytical Iowan, ANALYTICALIOWAN.
And no, he didn't have a PR firm do that.
No, no, that was all me.
That was all you.
Probably not the best idea, but it kind of works for what I'm doing. I try to break down everything like I do here and just speak news, politics, and shit.
Yeah, exactly. And when I did it, I just pulled Rational Boomer out of my ass. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't think I'd even stick with it. So things catch on, people get used to it, and it'll be fine. Check out Analytical Iowan at Analytical Iowan. That's Eric. He's got some great information. I watch him every day, and I get information that I don't have. So he's valuable to me too. For those listening, I appreciate the time you've taken to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again Tuesday.